Hi folks, and welcome to Breaking Woke, how to identify, debunk and dismantle dangerous ideas. Today we're looking at universities and asking the question, how did we go from studying things like formal logic and the basis of Western civilization to studying things like lesbian dance theory as being an equivalent? Where did the knowledge go, the accumulated knowledge that we have built up over some 2,000 to 3,000 years? Here's how academia used to work prior to roughly the 1960s. The idea was you would study everything that we have learnt so far. So you would start with things like formal logic and thoughts on morality based on thinkers from places like Athens and Jerusalem. You would study Roman philosophers, you would study medieval thinking, and you would ask honest questions about what was wrong with medieval thinking and where was there merit to be found. The basic idea was you look back over time and ask, what have we learned as a species? And you would think that that would be a wise thing to do, and indeed it was. Then in the 1960s something changed. Postmodernism was introduced to academia. Not merely introduced, but it supplanted the idea that there were true and valid answers. Now, this is a great and complex picture, but what I'd like to do today is just to share with you one man and one mechanism by which this was achieved to help you to understand the entire picture. Today we're picking on a man named Derrida. And Derrida was an Algerian-born French philosopher and critical theorist, and he was part of this postmodern movement. Now, if you're unfamiliar with postmodernism, a quick-hand way of thinking of the term is anti-truth. Or perhaps better stated, many competing truths. There is no such thing as an absolute or valid or objective truth. Instead, there are only voices for power, various competing narratives. So that is the mess that is postmodernism. It is anti-enlightenment. If we think of enlightenment as the search for truth, the search for science, the search for what really works, postmodernism is the movement that went in the opposite direction and tried to say, well, nothing really works. There is no truth. It is only narratives. Now, here's how it was applied to the project of getting rid of Western thought. Now, by Western thought, we're not talking about a particular race. We're talking about ancient Greece. We're talking about Jerusalem from the Middle East. We are even talking about the Arabian Nights and its influence on Western culture. Western culture is not a race. It is a set of ideas that has been developing over some 2,000 to 3,000 years. One of its greatest proponents today is a black gentleman born in Harlem by the name of Thomas Sowell, one of my intellectual heroes. So put race out of your mind. It is an intellectual tradition, something very different, and that's quite important. Now along comes Derrida, and he decides that what we really need to do is to re-examine the relationship between author, text, and reader. It gets quite complex, but here's the simple version of the thing. It used to be the case that an author decided what knowledge went into a text and the reader read it. That is how we've consumed knowledge for some 2,000 to 3,000 years. As of the 1960s, Derrida said, no. The author is not in charge of the meaning of the text. Instead, the reader may impose their meaning upon the text. Now, if that strikes you as a very strange idea, that's because you're sane. It is a very strange idea. Welcome to the clown mirror hall that is postmodernism. So in this particular paradigm, what happens is you as the reader bring your biases, bring your emotions, bring your narrative, bring your truth to the text. Now that is, you can see on the face of it, that is anti-science, it is anti-proper academic thinking. But that's what he proposed, and the left fell for it, and it has overhauled our university systems. So, you bring your meaning, your bias, your emotions, everything that is potentially flawed about your thinking and hasn't been vetted for a 2,000 to 3,000 year period by other thinkers. You impose that meaning on it. Now, along come people who want to take Western civilization out of the humanities and out of the sociology department. And it's hey, ho, ho, Western civ has got to go. And how do you defend Western civilization when the leading thinkers, in terms of literary criticism, are telling you, well, there's nothing of value back there. It's only about what you bring to the text. And that is how they got Western civilization taken out of the humanities department. So now we have this 2,000 to 3,000 year history of the most astonishing and rich thinking and ideas and vetting of ideas. We today are supposed to be critiquing the ideas of the ancient Greeks and the ideas of ancient Rome and of medieval Europe, and on and on and on. But postmodernism says, no, put it aside, because if you imply meaning on the text, then all past texts are meaningless. Who cares about formal logic? Who cares about the morality conceptions developed in the ancient Middle East? Who cares about any of it? Bring your personal biases and let's have a party in a book. And so that's one of the specific ways in which the left imposed orderlessness or meaninglessness on academia. Now you've got the breakdown of cultural will to defend a set of ideas. How can you defend something if everything is inherently meaningless and everything means as much as everything else? And with that in place, you can take people like Aristotle and Shakespeare and Milton and the great thinkers of the Western tradition and simply put them aside. And you can say, you know what's more important than that? Tribal lesbianism. Or rather, not more important, but equally valid. And it is equally valid because there is no such thing as a vetting of ideas anymore. Bring your subjective truth, bring your emotions, bring your biases, and we will call it scholarship. If you or your kids are about to head off to university, so many warnings to give. But here's perhaps the biggest one. Watch out for postmodernism. Deconstruction and postmodernism. Postmodernism is shorthand for anti-truth, and deconstruction is the idea that we don't go and read an author on his or her terms. We don't go searching for the validity of ideas, and we don't even engage with the ideas. We deconstruct them, and we ask, what is the power behind it? It is sinister, it is bad-intentioned, and it is a very clever way of dismissing all wisdom. How do we get it back? Well, for starters, you ignore postmodernism. It has nothing useful to offer. Humanity got as far as the Enlightenment, which was the search for truth and reason, and we were doing pretty well there. Ignore leftist thinkers who propose postmodernism and look out for deconstruction of text. It is a sinister way of failing to engage with an idea, of dismissing it because of its identity politics. Instead, go looking for the wisdom of the past. Doesn't mean you have to swallow it wholesale. You will find thoughts that you agree with in the great Roman philosophers, and you'll find thoughts that you don't agree with. And that debate, that tension, that is scholarship. That is how you learn to think. The postmodern project is anti-thought. It is how not to think. If you're heading off to varsity, there is much to be learned, but there is also much to be ignored. In these videos, we debate and debunk terrible leftist ideas and liberal progressive nonsense. If you find this useful, please share it. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do.